Trump has committed more crimes since we booked you yesterday. So, what is?
Yeah. Good morning, Steph. And how about we see some indictments for some of these crimes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Joyce Vance said the best part of social media is the confessions with Trump. Always and again, I know he's a notorious liar, but what do you make? I don't know if it's part of him trying to burn Ron DeSantis and the Republican Party to the ground, or but obviously that needs to be investigated, right?
It does, and it needs to be invested. The Department of Justice actually has no choice, because once they have been attacked and it's been alleged that DOJ was part of Trump's efforts to unlawfully interfere in the Florida election, let me tell you, DOJ has absolutely no discretion. They have to look into it, if only to debunk it.
Right.
So another good development, something else that needs to be investigated.
We talked off air. I said our friend Joyce Vance, just hours after the election, just tweeted, DOJ, you up? So, we were saying you tweeted Trump teases big announcement on 11/15. That's this coming Tuesday. You said, but a presidential bid will not shield him from criminal indictment. I asked you, are they waiting now for after the Georgia runoff? Like, what is your sense of what is happening?
No, I don't believe so. There's always another special election, and I don't think this will delay whatever it is the Department of Justice is poised to do. I think the midterm elections may very well have put off any overt law enforcement activity. I don't think a special runoff will. And I love Joyce. And when we're asking DOJ, are they up? Let me tell you, I was at a DOJ function with the assistant U.S. attorneys in the District of Columbia, my former colleagues and good friends. Mm-hmm. All of them are working like 27 hours a day on the insurrection cases. So DOJ is up, but the leadership of DOJ needs to unleash the good men and women who I believe are ready to prosecute, right? And so that's why I understand how thoughtful and careful and circumspect Merrick Garland is. I understand he wants to get it right, but at some point, you just have to move out, and that is where we are right now.
Yeah. Well, and you also tweeted, Republican-controlled House cannot stop a DOJ and criminal investigation of Trump and his co-conspirators. I mean, there they are measuring the drapes already again. They're like talking about having their leadership vote on who's going to be speaker, right? And you're like, hold on there, right? But also, as you try to say,
Kevin, put your crown back in mothballs, Kevin. We still have, it's still an open question. I didn't mean to prematurely call the House, and it looks like it's still an open question, maybe a long shot, but an open question. So Kevin McCarthy is a legislative thug, right? Jim the Yammerer Jordan is a legislative thug. And here's the thing, Steph. They want to open investigations into the search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. I say, have at it, Kevin. Bring it on. Because a federal judge concluded Donald Trump had evidence of crime at Mar-a-Lago. And lo and behold, he did. You want to investigate that? It starts to feel to me, Steph, like it's these corrupt legislators using the system and their power to obstruct justice. So DOJ needs to keep both of their eyes on the Kevins and the Jims of the Congress.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we still haven't gotten accountability for the members of Congress that were involved, right, in the insurrection. I guess I know we keep asking you to read Justice Department tea leaves, and it's hard to know. You kept an eye out for us on Stuart Rhodes this week.
See what
he shot his own eye out. We think it's all. Anyway, what
he did, but he still has perfect 20 vision.
Yes, does he really?
Oh, yes! Yes!
Glenn Louise Kirschner.
Nailed it.
But I'm bummed.
Anyway, so what was your take on, in covering that whole trial this week, on how closer we are to justice coming all the way to the top?
Yes, I've been in there every day. It's been tedious. It's also been interesting and enlightening. So the prosecution's case was really strong. It went in really well. And once they rested their case, these defendants started putting on witnesses who are fellow oath keepers, some of whom are indicted pending trial in the future. And they're taking the stand, Steph, and they're saying, my friends over here, these 5 defendants charged with, trying to violently overthrow the government, they didn't do anything wrong. We weren't. Trust me. Would I lie to you? Well, yes, you would.
Yeah.
You're an oath keeper, and
Yeah.
you're on trial in the future. So the good news is, as strong as the government's case was when they rested their case, it's getting stronger and stronger because of these absurd lying witnesses the defense is now calling.
Yeah. So the reporting this morning, Trump determined to launch his 2024 campaign next week from Mar-a-Lago, despite worse than expected Republican showing on Election Day and a looming runoff in Georgia. He intends to announce his third White House bid Tuesday at 9 p.m., even as a number of Republicans have publicly and privately said the party should move on from him. Sources tell the Daily Beast he's ready to rock and roll. It's hard to hold off at this point because it shows weakness, one advisor said, but there's also a chance he could come up with some reason. I mean, it is clear he thinks this will either protect him or at least distract from any coming indictments, right?
And it's a win-win, Steph, because it will not. There's no rule that says a candidate for office cannot be indicted, particularly if the election is 2 years away. That's absurd. But it looks like Donald Trump is not yet done killing the Republican Party. He's got one nail left, and he is prepared to drive it into the coffin lid, which is a beautiful thing. I urge him to announce. I invite him to announce, because I think that will pretty much spell the end of the Republican Party as it presently exists. He learned nothing from what just happened to the Republicans during the midterm. So, Donald, please remain in the mix.
No, I find myself agreeing with you, Glenn. I'm like, oh my God, this is, I underestimated how glorious it would be, not just the blue wave, but now watching the total disintegration of this party and the infighting, right? I mean, you made a great point on Twitter. You said, as we go to the polls today, it feels like we're less like we're voting on the issues and more like we're voting to protect our right to vote on the issues. And sure enough, despite what mainstream, pundits and pollsters said, people did care about saving democracy. They were paying attention to the January 6th hearings. Don't you think that was a factor in addition to Roe?
Absolutely. And what a tribute also to Joe Biden, because he has been steady. Yeah, he's not the most compelling speaker. He fumbles and mumbles. But you know what? He doesn't fumble and mumble the guidance of our nation back to some sense of sanity and decency and compassion and care for our fellow citizens. So I'll tell you, my hat's off to him. I'm never going to ask him to, give a speech, because we know that's not going to go well. But I do think it's good that we have him in the Oval Office with this calm, steady guidance.
Your colleague Andrew Weissman said something similar. He said it's time for the media to reassess the way they cover the Biden administration. Historic legislation has been passed. U.S. leadership is restored on the world stage, and the president exceeded expectations in the midterms. The White House deserves more credit than that. I mean, there is no way we would have had these results if he was as wildly unpopular as we're told he is. Do you think?
No, and look at how well things are turning out with respect to the midterm elections. I mean, we are on, and Steph, think about it. We are building, because look at the last election. Look at what happened recently in Kansas and Alaska. The blue, the sort of power of the blue continues to build, and as long as Donald Trump keeps flapping his gums, I think that's good for the Democrats in the long term.
Yeah. I mean, and by the way, this is, Ana Navarro, we were just talking about the media, just coronating Ron DeSantis when you have Gretchen Whitmer and Jared Polis and who's the other? Oh, Josh Shapiro, I think, really, having enormous victories in many ways on Tuesday. But Ana Navarro said, when she was saying that DeSantis rigged it, I mean, it seems to be their only talent is how do we cheat? And she said, what do you call passing laws, changing vote by mail, curtailing early voting? What do you call creating an unnecessary election police and making sure some black voters got arrested for cockamamie voting charges later dismissed in court? What do you call redistricting Florida to benefit the GOP? It really is true. And now with these latest Trump charges, because we forget how few votes he won by the first time. I mean, what happens then, by the way, if the DOJ does discover criminal wrongdoing in what Trump did in Florida to get DeSantis in the first place?
Well, you can't go back and undo election results, but you can hold folks accountable if they committed crimes in their determination to steal elections. So, DeSantis's cruelty and corruption and criminality is not sustainable for a politician. It's all going to come home to roost, hopefully sooner rather than later. But you can't go around kidnapping migrants and transporting them across state lines and not ultimately have that come back to bite you.
Yeah. The U.S. Treasury Department, the IRS, have asked the U.S. Supreme Court not to take extraordinary measures to prevent Congress from receiving Donald Trump's tax records. Earlier this month, as we know, Chief Justice Roberts issued a stay to block the House Ways and Means Committee from getting the tax record. A lower court has ruled the committee is entitled to see the tax returns. So the Treasury and IRS argued Trump's team cannot satisfy the demanding standard for that extraordinary relief. I mean, here we are again at, the Trump-stacked Supreme Court with justice delayed again.
Yeah, and I am not all that concerned because it looks like the pattern that's emerging here with these sort of emergency stays. Lindsey Graham filed one, and remember, Clarence Thomas temporarily granted it, but then when it went to the full court just days later, the full court unanimously basically said, Lindsey, get your butt into the grand jury in Georgia and testify about Donald Trump's election crimes. So there's a pattern of emergency stays being temporarily granted until they can get a reply from the other side. They can get the whole court to look at it, and then they can say, yeah, there's nothing here. And remember, the Supreme Court already declared Donald Trump isn't a king when they ordered that Donald Trump's tax returns and financial records from Mazars be turned over to the New York state prosecutor. So yeah. I think these taxes are ultimately going to be disclosed.
Yeah. Boy, speaking of justice delayed, a Connecticut judge has ordered Alex Jones to pay an additional $11 billion. No, I made that up. $473 million on top of the, what did he right, he'd already been ordered to pay $965 million. I mean, you see him openly taunting these poor families and saying you're never going to see a dime and there's no money. Is he going to be able to evade this justice forever?
He's not going to evade financial justice. I don't, and that is important, particularly you can't make the Sandy Hook families whole, but you can punish the what out of Alex Jones for lying and taking advantage of the tragedy of people's children being murdered. I want him prosecuted in the event the evidence supports a prosecution. That's where justice comes in. Money's important. Send him to the poorhouse. Give every penny he has to the Sandy Hook families. But he needs to be held accountable for his part in ginning up the insurrection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Time for the final legal tea leaves. Who do you think's up first? Espionage, Georgia, Fulton County, DOJ in terms of January 6th. I mean, I don't know, again, is Georgia going to be slowed down because the Georgia runoff? I mean, I don't know to what degree legal people take these things into consideration. Like you say, he's not a candidate, but what do you think?
Yeah, Steph, you don't know and none of us know, but I do think with the classified documents crimes that are so obvious, that are so provable, and that are so dangerous to our national security, that horse is now out in front. Yeah. And I actually feel like we're going to see some indictments fairly soon for the Mar-a-Lago stuff. Maybe Georgia follows, maybe the insurrection after that. I think we're getting closer and closer. Just people need to know that just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen. I still believe it will happen.
Now, just for my entertainment purposes, since the presidential announcements at Mar-a-Lago, which is the scene of the crime for espionage, wouldn't it be convenient to do it at the announcement? I'm just asking. Wouldn't that be a good time?
It would. Let's just wrap Mar-a-Lago in crime scene tape.
Yes, in crime scene tape. There you go.
I say we turn Mar-a-Lago into a federal penitentiary.
Sure. Let's hope he makes a run for it. I don't know. Okay.
Stepping over Schlitz cans?
Yes. Trying to climb the fence.
Yeah, like cops.
His pants fall down. Okay. All right, Glenn. Thanks for playing. All right, Steph. See you next week, honey. There he goes. Glenn Kirschner. You can still see his fantastic performance in Sexy Liberal LA.
Yes.
Pay-per-view, sexyliberal.com. Yep. It's even funnier now.
It is.